sculpture is an offering to God. So you don't put your name on it. And so this idea, so many songs and painting and sculptures and crafts and so on, they were really not part of any particular person. So you have these things people are angry now against, and for good reasons. So saying, who do they belong to? And one of the great things India discovered was zero. And we know, all of us know, who have studied even go up to grade 5, what zero, how important it is in all of our lives. And so people say, well, who invented zero and what did he get out of it? And then in our own history of science, who the invention of calculus by Newton and Leibniz, what kind of patent they had on it. And so now the GM crops are causing big problems in India. Again, not so much, this is not always informed reaction. I should caution you, I shouldn't say this has been always wrong. But because there is so much distrust, what these things have done is created distrust against another civilization. This is truly a clash of civilizations. Can we trust these things coming from the West? What is underneath? Who's being sold? Who's being bought? Which politician? Which company? So there's a great distrust in people that things coming from other parts of the world, particularly the West. And so against Monsanto, again, so many protests, and you see, and so on. Now India has, in the last few years, because of these litigation going on, costing a lot of money, a lot of anger, a lot of distrust, and really we talk of clash of civilization sometimes. This is a fear that West is imposing its model of good life. Whatever good life. Is it good for them? We now good to learn that so much food that we eating not so good. And our ways of doing it not so good. So people are now setting up this traditional digital library in which 14 million pages of formatted information is in the last 10 years in 5 languages. So that now you see, otherwise the money that were being spent on litigation and indigenous uses in food, in agriculture, healthcare, cosmetics, survival strategies. Because every society in India has had a long tradition of civilization over at least 5,000 years. So people have learned to survive. Not everybody is dying left, right, and center. People have learned to cope with a lot of things. So from oral culture to a written culture, because India has most societies before the script or before, so few percentage of people know how to read and write. In 1809, beginning of 19th century, right in the middle of an age of enlightenment, France, half the population did not know how to sign its name. So yeah, it is a written culture, has been came much later. It's the oral culture, or that has been documentation in international languages, so many of the search for sources, that geographical indicators are some things belong specifically to some area. Ownership by community for communal good. These are moral questions, ethical questions, religious questions. What does belong to somebody? Now we have been here in the West particularly obsessed with this question of mind-body split. Is there two or the one? What nourishes whom? Now the really question is this individual community split? Are we individuals, and this notion that I'm a self-made man is a misnomer. And it's a strange idea. That nobody's self-made. Really, nobody's self-made. We are not insular. We are created by so many forces, both from our families, our community, our culture, our history, our people who have gone by thousands of years, not just genomes and genes and so on, but how cultures, our needs have gone by. So really this idea of individual and community split, that's at the heart of what is traditional knowledge. So I'm going to stop. Thank you very much.
Questions, and I'd like people to line up over here, and maybe if you could back over there, if that's all right with you, then we can have some questions and answers, and let's see what we come to. As you're coming up, I'll just, okay, then you're up, and I'll...
Nancy Boyce-Freed, and my question is, could you give us the answers to what happened with the tumor and the name and other cases?
All three cases, fortunately, India won. They won. Yeah, but it created a lot of anger and frustration and made everybody involved that we need to be cautious. We need to see how this whole idea of creating a library, that we should put it down, find out is there any mention of name or how they are anywhere in our stories, our myths, so that nobody tells you it has never been mentioned. It's completely new, unknown, unwritten. So fortunately, all these cases, success stories. But not, there are many other stories that are floating at present.
You mentioned this very briefly in your talk, but I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate and make the connection between the very tragic situation of these farmer suicides and the reasons they go into debt related to the Green Revolution, Biotech Revolution. A lot of them are drinking the very pesticides that they're forced to buy or told that they have to buy, and then go into debt because they can't afford to keep that up. And there's a recent movie, I don't know if you've seen Peeply Live, that deals with that.
Yes, thank you. Yes, there is a film, again, India, as some of you do know, India is a big producer of films in the world, and not all of those films are just dance and songs. There are some very serious films, and one is Peeply Live that he mentioned. There was modern agriculture in India is becoming very expensive. A lot of chemicals are needed at this stage, seeds have to be bought, machinery has to be bought, and as I said, from what the statistics I have gathered, what they receive is only about 10 to 25% of what the retail person and the retail shop is paying. So it doesn't pay. Agriculture is becoming some business not worth doing. And people would say, if I have 2 acres of land, 5 acres of land, 10 acres, but I would rather sell it. And they speculate it, sell it to some for some urban purpose, saying the far more money to be made this way than actually producing. So this idea of suicide, this desperation, people in a state of desperation. And what is happening is that many times their families, the widows, also remain widows because nobody wants to be married to a woman who also is carrying that burden of loan. So it's creating great disruptions and destruction to the family life at many levels.
So I just heard an extensive discussion on NPR indicate, well, around the issue of India's growth rate in 2013 is down to 5% compared to China, which is still hovering 9%, 10%, 11% a year. And India is therefore seen as falling behind. And Indian leaders, and politicians, and economists are scurrying to try to figure out how to get the growth rate back up to 9, 10, 11%, which is ultimately destructive. And it seems to me that, in this total context, that India could become a model for a sustainable society. I mean, the potential is there. I mean, so that growth rate of 5% could be a good thing. But again, context is the key, particularly when there's so much disparity in the income. But I just wondered how you would approach that issue.
Thank you. Growth rate in India is now, agriculture produces about 18% of the total. So you have service sector and manufacturing sector. Some of the slowdown has been actually a lot of speculation had gone on the real estate, which has, I think, artificially increased the growth rate patterns in the country. But India, I don't have the solution. I don't want to pretend, but I want, because I'm not really in the field or in And also I'm too old to think about these things. But really India is at the cusp of change. And it could, if its great leaders will come forth and great other thinkers and other people will come who mobilize the youth of the country, it could be a very different kind of society than West has. A different kind of agriculture, different kind of urban life. And so I look at it sometimes quite with great hope, but then also with some degree of scare, fear. That what if it goes this route, then the disparity, the differences between the very rich, and their number is huge, huge, in absolute number is huge, and then the number of people who are really quite desperate. But I remember asking once a friend of mine who was a Marxist historian, what does class mean in the modern sense? So he said, really, the class, really, anybody who aspires to the same thing constitutes a class. Everybody in the world now belongs to the middle class, in their mind, if not in their real life. They want to be like them. So this is quite a change. And when that middle class means education for the children, they want to have life insurances, they want to have some money left over, they want to travel, they want to have home, shelter, so the security of that kind. And India, with this medium age at 25, 26, has the possibility of doing it. The median age in China, I think, is 32. So India could achieve. I mean, I sometimes look at it with a good degree of optimism.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed your presentation. I have a question about India, sort of writ large, as to whether or not it considers food sovereignty, things produced in India for Indians and Indian people within the continental India. On the one hand, because in western Ethiopia, Gambela, almost the entire province has been leased by touring industries with the idea of bringing 300,000 Punjabi farmers to cultivate there. And I wonder if you have any comments in terms of how that might not only impact the idea of sovereignty of food within India itself, number one, and also contribute to food security if they are shipping similar varieties, corn, basmati rice. I'm not sure what they're growing exactly. They have a whole repertoire there. You can look it up. Oakland Institute has done a lot of research on it, for one. But it also impacts very severely on food security in Ethiopia.
Yes.
And this also is, there are probably many other instances in developing countries, particularly Africa, of this kind of expansion. It's a different type, it's similar to previous, shall we say, Indian diasporas and indentured laborers. But it's different in the contemporary world in terms of capacitation of people on the one hand, but the whole food security issue is pretty important.
Yeah, thank you. See, sometimes we think of India as a poor country, but in Asia, India is a big boy. India gives aid to 54 countries, food aid. And it is trying to make its presence felt, known in many parts of Africa and other parts of Asia, because it has its demands for energy, for oil, for resources which it may not have on its own, are huge. So it is playing a more and more active role in many parts of the world. Last year or 2 years ago, one of the Indian companies bought Jaguar from England, a car, famous British car. So India is, we may think of India from here as though India is a poor country, but India India is a poor country where a lot of poor people live, but there are a lot of rich people as well, and whose idea of what they're going to do is different from what has been done before. So it is true, as you mentioned, that it is, whether it is taking land in Ethiopia or some parts of Africa, as China is doing, to grow what? And for what purpose? And to have political influence. And so that better political relationships means better trade relationships. Very important. India is a big player in Asia, if not in the world. And it will become even bigger.
Thank you, Sehdev. Mark Coopers. I like the Indian database that you had shown, and of interest to me was, I don't know the name of it, but there is an internationally recognized legal entity that will declare indigenous or regional foods as a protected item, much in the way that Parma, Italy, is now recognized as being an entity that sells Parmesan cheese, and what the French, of course, did for champagne. And of interest to me, most recently in Korea, they were successful in blocking Japanese products of kimchi, whereas kimchi is normally a lacto-fermented product, an ancient product, which has healthful benefits due to the lacto-fermentation of it. The Japanese market was, they were undercutting them by merely taking the ingredients and adding vinegar, which brought it to market much quicker, but it was not, in fact, what the Koreans considered kimchi. It was a very deep connection, and they were successful in getting that protection. Can you talk to what extent the university system and the government is helping entities in India get the scientific information they need to recognize the medical and scientific benefits such that they can go through this entity and get it recognized?
Thank you. Very good question. Yeah, indeed, what these attempts at patenting haldi and neem and basmati rice has done is woken up a lot of scientists in India and other people that we should have a more organized, systematic, scientific database information, and find out if there are references to these things and other things in our books, where and how we can tabulate. This has really given rise to a whole formulating traditional knowledge in a more systematic way. India, I mentioned, started in 2002, and in these last 10 years have done a remarkable collection. But this is also happening in other countries. Every country with a long tradition of civilization, whether it's Mexico or Peru, or in Africa, or in Indonesia, or Philippines, every country has had traditions of traditional knowledge. And so to tabulate it, to systematize it, so that they feel protected, they feel that you don't go through the same thing all over again. It's expensive, it creates bad relationships between countries, great distrust. So it's being done more and more. And more research money is being spent in India to say how can we systematize it, be more scientific about it.
I've been fascinated by the questions and by your commentary and your presentation, so thank you very much for that. I'd like to pose a question for you related to the overall topic, and that is, in India today there are monocrops. A monocrop is wheat. Wheat is susceptible. There's a UG99 strain of wheat rust that has come across from Africa and has crossed into the Arabian Peninsula and is clearly in Iran right now. and most likely in Afghanistan to some extent. So the question is, since the wheat in India is all a monocrop, what preparations and what preparation, number one, will the new seed that's being developed be there in time to avoid a calamity that is a collapse of the wheat? Because it is a major, that is the major crop. And then the second question is, suppose that the only fix is genetically modified wheat, which could be easily likely. Now, granted, a lot of the research is being done right down the street, so to speak, from here at Cornell University. But it's important. I'm wondering, from your perspective, would genetically modified wheat be acceptable?
Well, last year, about a year and a half ago, they tried to introduce genetically modified brinjals, eggplant.
Yes.
And there was a large reaction against it. And the reason is, I think there is an overall sense of distrust that our politicians, our scientists, our corporations, they are not transparent. And what they do is not always to be trusted. And so there were debates and clashes and demonstrations, and finally it was withdrawn. And I personally, I think there's much to be said about genetically modified foods, personally my senses. But in order to sell it to many countries and make them acceptable, you have to, they have to win over a lot of people who feel that they have lost trust.
So, okay, I hear that. So how do you raise the trust in the Indian context? What's your prescription for us, if you have one?
I would say there's more media presentations, more success stories coming from other parts of the world, but losing trust takes a long time to rebuild it. It's true of human relations as it is true in countries, but slow process. And GM foods and other things, seeds, generally there has been a lack of transparency.
So the father of the Green Revolution, really, the father of the Green, even though Norman Borlaug is the father of the Green Revolution from our perspective, but within the Indian context, Swaminathan is the father of the Green Revolution. Yet he, as a scientist, he developed all of these and helped develop all of these cultivars that were very successful. Now, granted, they were successful because they used a lot of water, and everybody knows that now. And they know that, unfortunately, to the demise of lots of farms because they're not able to. Yes. So, but my question is that he came out in favor of blocking brinjal, the genetically modified eggplant. So my question of you is, explain that to us.
Well,
if you can.
He too was very much swayed by the general feeling that that politicians and others are not upfront what exactly is going on under the table. And the Minister of Environment at the time had to resign. Brinjal was not accepted, genetically modified. Many scientists were divided. But overall, the general feeling in the country is, watch out anything that's coming out from the West.
Now, this is an important issue because there it is, the potentials for these technologies to come in that may be very helpful, although they may be very harmful, and they don't know, and the rejection is very high. And unfortunately, the risk that goes with the rejection, the total rejection, and that's what it is, a total rejection, is the risk that some real need will develop and there won't be a replacement. There's another question after me, and then we'll probably call this to a close right now. No, by all means. Please do.
Kumar, thank you very much for a very interesting talk. I want to make an observation and ask you if India might devise a solution. It is the case that very large cities around the world find themselves in the position of building infrastructure in large cities and populations going to those cities And to do this, they are concreting over the most productive farmlands that had been, that's maybe the reason the cities were built there in the first place, is that it was an area where richness could be sustained. That happens in China. Goodness knows, I know about in the United States. It is a tragedy that the richest farmland is often being given over to shopping malls, which go out of existence and more distance. Now, when Roberto and I were in India some years ago, there was, and of course I love your English language newspapers, we were able to follow all the political things and read everything. There was a huge issue in southern China where a large manufacturer, I'm sorry I cannot recall the name, was appropriating land all around an area where it wished to build a large manufacturing concern. And it was taking over all the farmland, the small farmers were being, but India, the Indians, those small farmers, did not go down easily. And I wonder if there is not the potential in